Hello, Your Excellency. First, thank you for coming. Knowledge violation of personal information has shown how much change the introduction of GDPR will bring and also led to citizens' awareness of safety of personal information. However, I know that there is a significant amount of overstatement in the event of a branch of regulations. And I wonder if there is any way we can resolve this with something other than fines.
Wow, that's a really complicated question, I think, actually. This is all to do with personal information and how we control it, how we regulate the use of personal information. And I think you have really put me on the spot here with a question on which, one, I have to confess I am not a great expert. However, it's also a question where any of us can say we are not an expert on this question of the use of personal information, but we all have to care about it. None of us can say, actually, that question is irrelevant to me, it's insignificant, it doesn't have any bearing on my life. Because for every single one of us, this question of the transfer of information, of the way in which personal information is used, I think is becoming a very crucial question in our lives. I don't think at the moment that we have found an effective way of signalling to people that there are good and convincing guarantees of the protection of personal information. And I think this must be very obvious to people if you look across the world and you look at the extent to which many of the information systems which we use every day are vulnerable both to hacking, but are also vulnerable to being used in ways in which the people concerned have not given explicit consent for their information to be used in that sort of way. But I do think that while we are still searching for an effective way of balancing the need to regulate with the need to develop these systems in a way that they are free to offer the benefits, the very significant benefits to us that they do. As I say, I don't think we have found that convincing balance yet. But in advance of that, I do think that it is very much each of our individuals' personal responsibility to take wise and sensible decisions about the way in which we use our personal information, to ask sensible questions about the way in which that information is protected. So, for example, there are things in which you can make a decision that says, okay, in order to perhaps read some information online, or in order to buy something, or in order to participate in some communication group, that you will be giving some of your personal information. Now that's a decision which every individual can take, but some people will say, actually, I'm not so keen to do that. So every time you get one of these messages that says, okay, this program needs access to your information, or this app will need access to this, this, and this, there is a decision for all of us to take as to whether that is something in which we are happy for personal information to be used or not. There are other situations in which it's much more difficult for us to pick and choose. As I say, if I simply don't want to participate in some sort of communication group because it requires too much information to me, or if I don't want to download a particular app because it requires me to give, then I can decide that. However, if my bank asks me for information, or if they say, look, actually we need a bit more information from you, it's more difficult for me to say, actually, no, I don't want to give that information, because I have to have banking services. So I can close my account and I can say, no, I'll go and take my account to somewhere that needs less information, but it's less easy just to say kind of yes or no. But I do think, as I say, that I think these are things which all of us should be thinking wisely and responsibly about, aware of the risks that unless we know that there is sort of special protective software or special protective programs on particular kind of information systems, I think we have to operate on the assumption that when we are sort of downloading our personal information, that we are putting ourselves at some sort of risk. But risk management and risk mitigation is always a decision which I think it needs to be made by the individual people in this sense. It may be that we will arrive eventually, as we understand more how to do these things, that we will arrive at a more effective framework of regulation. But at the moment, my personal feeling is this is an area that's full of contradictions, and it's one in which, as I say, we have to be alive to the risks and prepared to make sensible, wise decisions on our own behalf.